years ago, I used to work the night shift at a small gas station near a highway. During the day, I had another job, and at night, I worked at the gas station. My financial situation was really bad at the time, so I didn't really have the luxury of complaining about being tired. I was just trying to survive and somehow get through those difficult days. Night shifts were usually very boring. After midnight, it was rare for any customers to show up. Sometimes only 2 or 3 people would come in the entire night. But around my second or third month working there, something strange started to happen. Almost every night at around 2 a.m., the same guy would come into the store. He was extremely tall, probably around 7 feet, very skinny, with long, messy hair. His face always looked tired and a little unsettling. He would usually come in, buy an energy drink and a pack of cigarettes, and then leave without saying much. But there was one thing that always felt strange. Every time he came in, he would look at me and give me a slight smile. One night, as he placed his items on the counter, he asked me, "What's your name?" I said, "Jason." He stared at me for a few seconds. Then he slowly said, "Jason, I like that name." After that, he let out a quiet little laugh, like he was thinking about some private joke that only he understood. He grabbed his things and walked out of the store. That night, I got curious. I stood by the window and watched him. I expected him to get into a car and drive away. But instead, he crossed the parking lot and disappeared into the darkness on foot. That's when I realized something. He never actually bought gas. He only came into the store and then disappeared into the darkness. After that, he kept coming almost every night for weeks. Sometimes he looked so exhausted that he would just stand near the shelves and stare at the wall. But every time he came in, he would say the same thing. "Hey, Jason." One night, I finally asked him his name. He stared at me for a few seconds before answering. "Eric." I don't know why, but something about the way he said it made me feel like he was lying. Then I casually asked, "So, Eric, what do you do for work?" He suddenly started laughing. Seeing him smile like that made me feel extremely uncomfortable. Then he slowly said, "For now, I'm not working." There was something cold about the way he said it. That night he left, and then he didn't show up for an entire week. Honestly, I had almost gotten used to seeing him, but he always gave me a creepy feeling. Then one night, there was a huge storm outside. The wind was howling and the rain wouldn't stop. The gas station was completely empty. Suddenly, the store door opened. I looked up, and it was him. But this time, he looked completely different. He was soaking wet from the rain. My heart started beating faster. I gathered some courage and asked in a shaky voice, "Eric, are you okay? What are you doing out in a storm like this?" He slowly said, "Jason, I did something I shouldn't have done." My heart started racing. I asked, "What do you mean?" He looked straight at me and said, "I need somewhere to hide, just for a little while." Then he turned and walked down the hallway toward the restrooms without waiting for an answer. I suddenly felt very uncomfortable. A few minutes later, the entire gas station suddenly went dark. All the lights shut off. The whole store was completely dark. I grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the back room where the electrical panel was. As I passed the restrooms, both doors were open, but he wasn't inside. My heart started pounding. I slowly walked into the back room. Then I heard something. The sound of wet shoes moving slowly across the floor. I quietly said, "Eric?" At that moment, my flashlight landed on the corner of the room, and he was standing there. His terrifying eyes were locked directly on me. Suddenly, he lunged at me and screamed, "You saw me!" I shoved him as hard as I could and ran toward the front of the store. I ran outside, jumped into my car, and immediately called the police. Within minutes, they arrived. They found him sitting in the corner of the back room, curled up like a wounded animal. The police took him away. A few weeks later, I found out something disturbing. Eric wasn't even his real name. And earlier that same night, he had committed a horrible crime at his home. After that incident, I immediately quit that job. And honestly, after that night, I never worked another night shift again. A few years ago, I used to work as a delivery driver. Because of that job, I often had to drive late at night. At night, the roads are usually completely empty, but sometimes you run into people who give you a really strange feeling. One night, around 3:30 a.m., I was driving down the highway. I was already pretty tired, and my car was running low on fuel. After a while, I noticed a small gas station on the side of the road. The parking lot was completely empty. The only vehicle there was an old pickup truck parked near one of the pumps. I pulled my car up to a pump and started filling the tank. That's when I suddenly felt like someone was watching me. I looked up. A man was standing near the glass door of the store. He was just standing there, silently staring at me. He was wearing a dark hoodie, and something about him made me feel very uncomfortable. At first, I thought maybe he was the cashier. When my tank was full, I walked into the store to pay. Inside, he was the only person there. But he didn't look like a cashier. He was standing between the aisles, slowly watching me. The counter was completely empty, so I asked him, "Where's the cashier?" The man gave a slight smile and said, "He's in the bathroom." His voice sounded strange, almost like he was joking. Suddenly, I started to feel uneasy. So I quickly left the money on the counter and walked back outside. Just as I was about to get into my car, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. The man was walking out of the store, but he didn't have a car. He was walking straight toward mine. My heart started beating faster. I quickly got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The man walked up to my window and stood there. Then he slowly said, "You're leaving already?" I didn't answer. His face was now very close, and his eyes were staring directly at me. Then suddenly, he tried to open the rear door handle, but the door was locked. At that moment, I was genuinely scared. I immediately started the engine. As I drove away from the gas station, I looked in the rearview mirror. The man was standing in the middle of the parking lot, staring at me. But the strangest part was this. Behind him, the pickup truck that had been parked there earlier, something in the back of it moved, like someone else was hiding in there with him. After seeing that, I was completely shaken. I didn't stop the car anywhere on the road that night. I drove straight home before I could finally breathe again. And even today, whenever I stop at a gas station late at night, the first thing I do is check the back seat of my car. I have driven at night many times in my life. Back then, it was a habit for me and my friends to stay out very late, sometimes even until sunrise. One night, around 3:45 a.m., I was driving back home after dropping one of my friends at his house. On the way, I realized that my car was almost out of fuel, so I stopped at a small 24-hour gas station. The station was completely silent. No cars, no people. As I was walking toward the building to make the payment, a short man walked past me. He took a couple of steps forward, then suddenly stopped. Slowly, he turned around and started staring directly at me. I felt something strange, so I asked him, "What's your problem?" He stayed silent for a few seconds, then calmly said, "Nothing." His tone was extremely cold. I went inside, paid for the fuel, and out of habit, I also bought a lottery ticket. When I came back outside, the man was nowhere to be seen. I didn't think much of it and started filling my car's tank. A few minutes later, the tank was full. I got into my car and started driving back home. Everything felt completely normal. But after a short while, I sensed a slight movement behind me in the car. At first, I thought maybe something had fallen. Then I looked into the rearview mirror, and there was a man sitting in my back seat. My heart almost stopped. I slammed on the brakes and shouted, "Get out of my car!" It was the same man. I immediately jumped out of the car and started screaming for help. Within seconds, lights from nearby houses turned on and people started coming outside. The man slowly stepped out of the car and kept staring at me. There was no peace in his smile, only a deep hunger, like an old butcher carefully examining his prey. Then suddenly he said, "You didn't even notice. I was sitting right behind you." He paused for a moment, then added, "If I wanted to, I could have killed you right there." After saying that, he ran into the darkness. After that night, I never liked driving alone at night again, and I avoid stopping at gas stations late at night whenever possible. Even today, when I drive, I sometimes can't help but check my rearview mirror. This incident happened in the early 1970s. At the time, I was around 9 years old. I lived with my mother, and every morning my uncle used to drive us to school. He was a mechanic, and his workshop was on the same road as our school. Because of that, we used to ride to school every morning in his pickup truck. It was usually very early in the morning, and most of the time it was still dark when we left the house. The drive to school was pretty long, so my uncle would often stop at a small gas station along the way. There was an old attendant who worked there. He was always friendly. Whenever he saw me, he would smile and say, "Good morning, champ." Then he would fill up the truck with gas and clean the windshield. Behind the station, there was also a small restroom that I sometimes used. But one morning, when we arrived there, something felt strange. The station lights were on, but there was no one there. No cars, no attendant. My uncle honked the horn, then he honked again, but no one came outside. My uncle said that maybe the attendant was inside, so we waited there for a few minutes. At that moment, I actually needed to use the bathroom, but my uncle said, "Forget it, we're getting late." So we left the gas station and continued driving to school. 2 days later, my mother was in the kitchen listening to the radio. Suddenly, the expression on her face changed. I asked her if everything was okay, but she didn't answer me. She turned the volume down and started listening to the news very carefully. Then she called my uncle into the room. The radio was reporting that a murder had taken place at a gas station along the highway. According to the report, the police had found the body of the station attendant in the storage room. Someone had attacked him from behind, and the cash register had also been robbed. When my mother heard the name of the gas station, she immediately looked at my uncle. It was the exact same gas station where we used to stop every morning. That was the first time I realized that the silence we experienced that morning wasn't normal at all. Sometimes I still think about it. If we had stayed there just a little longer, or if I had gone to the restroom that morning, we might have come face to face with something truly horrifying. After that day, my uncle never, ever stopped at that gas station on the highway again.